if what we call public opinion was just a manufactured narrative that makes it easier to convince people that if their views are different, then there's something wrong with that, or there's something wrong with them.
Spending is a tax. As soon as the government spend money, eventually it's a tax. Sometimes we put a direct tax on the people, sometimes we borrow the money, and sometimes we print the money.
Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth.
The Patrick Riggins Show. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Oh, yeah. You've completed the weekly marathon. You've made it to Saturday at 4 p.m. finish line. You've arrived at the Patrick Riggins Show. Sure, it's a long run, 7 whole days, but it's worth it. Here you're going to get logic and reason to carry you through the next week. These are the headwaters of freedom and liberty. What you hear on this show today, you'll probably hear downstream on another one in a few days or a few weeks, depending on how far down the river they are. You might not even hear it until sometime next year. Who knows? But since you're listening today, you'll already have quenched your thirst for freedom and be eager to share with others the cool spring water of liberty. Oh, and before we get started, let me say you're listening to us, the Patrick Riggins Show, on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and locally on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. As most of you already know, I listen to a lot of different sides of talk radio during the week, but something that really caught my ear was how much of what I heard this week, these arguments concerning government and its role in our lives. We were talking about this on the show almost a month ago, and some of it was even before that, back to last year. What's interesting, though, is I know these other commentators and political pundits don't listen to this show. It just hasn't reached the point that national people are listening to what we have to say here. I'm not going to kid myself. So the only other conclusion is, despite what the major mainstream media and the Washington government establishment from both parties want you to believe, despite them, this country is starting to move towards more libertarian ideas. And it's absolutely driving these people bonkers. You hear it when they give press conferences. You hear it when they're reporting on it. It's really starting to permeate the so-called ruling class of government, and they're starting to panic. They don't want you making decisions for yourself. They don't want you living your life without government. They don't want you demanding your individual rights. And again, this is both sides, Democrat and Republican, liberal and conservative. Let me remind you, though, I'm talking about establishment people, not the rank and file. The people out here in the country might still label themselves Democrat or Republican, but they have practically nothing in common idea-wise or income-wise or anything else. These regular people out here have practically nothing in common with this ruling class establishment people in government and media. But getting back to my point, I think what I heard this week demonstrates just how far ahead this show is and how far ahead you'll be when you listen to it. It's really nice to hear all these ideas from this show from back then being repeated now. It gives us a feeling of validation. Not that we need it, not that we're looking for the approval of others, but just to know that the ideas espoused here are starting to catch on in the rest of the country. That's what I take away from all this. No, it's not, hey, I told you so, and I told you I'm right. That's none of that, not in the least. What I take away from this echoing of ideas of this show is America is starting to wake up to the reality that is government run amok. And they want to put a stop to it. The problem is, a lot of people don't know what to do. They've been voting Democrat or Republican all their lives. They don't know how to break ranks and vote for another party. But don't worry, that's why we're here. That's why this show is here. to help you break out of this two-party thinking and start using the intelligence and the reasoning, the logic that you have within your brain to see through all the hoopla and vote for a good libertarian or libertarian-leaning candidates. It makes me feel good to know that I'm associated with this show and the service it's providing, that it's putting ideas and information out there, well, like I said, almost a year ahead of the rest of the pack on the radio dial. This is why I say I try not to waste your time on this show. I try to pack in 43 minutes or so of good logic and reason that you can use not only in your political opinion, but throughout your life. Govern yourself with independent thought instead of political emotion that often passes for it. And speaking of happenings this week, I've been watching what's been happening with this government shutdown or slim down, whatever you want to call it. What you're seeing is what's going to be happening when we hit the debt limit debate, which is starting up now. The government is going to stop payment on everything that will impact the public the most. They will try to inflict as much pain as they can in order for you to straighten up and stop questioning what they do. Stop demanding they answer to you. They also trust the mainstream media to get out there and interview people not, getting their checks and getting kicked out of their houses and not being able to afford food or medical care. This is the media's job to highlight all this suffering, all because we demand government live within its means. And I'm just warning you, this is what's coming. We were talking about this last year when we had the debt limit show going on then. Now we're on debt limit 2, which is really more like debt limit 30. We keep raising the debt limit over and over, promising, well, this time we're going to cut that spending. But it never happens. And it's not going to happen until we demand it by kicking out the establishment people and putting in congressional representatives that will start reining in the government. We're getting the same old worn-out story every year. Every year. It never changes. The government doesn't stop spending too much money. It's like that deadbeat friend you have that complains they can never catch a break. Nothing is working out. Hey, so do you mind loaning them some money? The government isn't learning the lesson of financial management. And just like that friend, it isn't going to learn that lesson until you give it some tough love. You're going to have to stop enabling the government by allowing it to continue to spend more and more money. What's going to happen if we don't fix it this time? Our friend is going to come knocking at the door again next year, wanting to borrow some more money. It's going to be the same story all over again. We have to raise the debt limit. We have to pay our bills. If we don't raise it, we might default on our obligations. All the same scare tactics, all the same doom and gloom. I mean, are you getting tired of the excuses yet? Just look at the psychosis of this administration, this government. They are punishing the citizens of this country because we're demanding the government not spend all this money. Our creation, government, that's who created government. It was us, the citizens of this nation. Government didn't come first. We did. We created it. And here it's going to throw a temper tantrum when we demand it start living within its means. How dare we talk back to the government? Look, bub, we created you, and we can sure as heck uncreate you. And maybe that's what we need, a reset, a do-over, a complete shutdown of government, a cutting off of all aid. We immediately cease taking money from one American citizen to pay the bills of another. Then we start all over again, and this time we have to amend the Constitution every time the government wants to do something that isn't listed in that document. No two ways about it. If you want free stuff, you have to convince the rest of us to pay for it by amending the Constitution. Now, I'm not stupid. There's no way that's ever going to happen. You know why? Because 99% of this BS wouldn't pass. The American people would never vote for it. That's why we're not asked. That's why we never amend the Constitution. It wouldn't work. Instead, Congress creates government agencies to carry out aid programs, with them unconstitutionally granting those agencies the authority to fund and regulate these programs. I mean, truth be told, we're not even demanding government really live that much within its means. It stopped doing that long ago. All we're doing is trying to slightly rein back all this spending. And look how Washington reacts. It's like a spoiled child. It throws a fit and lashes out at the adults, and that would be us, the citizens. It lashes out at us, trying to inconvenience everyone as much as possible. All right, we're up on the first break here on the Patrick Riggin Show. We have a whole lot to get to this hour. So we will get started on it as soon as we come back from this first break. Join us in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Patrick Riggin Show. Here on the beacon of hope for a nation riding out the storms at sea, the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network, along with our friends here at News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Boy, we play some good music on this show. you just won't hear this on any show, any other show, that is. You always hear it on this one. Real quick here, we wrapped up that last segment before I could get to this. We have some audio from the press conferences that were detailing the government shutdown from both the president and he had a press conference, and then the Republican leadership had a press conference, otherwise known on this show as the Republican establishment. So first off, here was what the president had to say about all this. Now, I have to warn you before I play this. Some of you might get a little irritated listening to him, but I stress patience, okay? Just don't give in to the rhetoric. Just listen to the clip. This is the clip from President Obama's press conference. I think it was the other day. I don't have a date on it, but I think it was the other day when he gave that press conference. Here we go. Wow. Some really controversial statements being made there. After listening to that tirade, I'm not so sure I should play the Republican side of this or not. We just had the president speaking on that first clip. This next clip, it has a few of the Republicans, and they're all kind of trying to chime in. So, okay, I think I'll go ahead and play it against my better judgment. But here's the Republican press conference. Now, they're all trying to speak at once, so it might be a little hard to make out exactly what they're saying. But if you listen closely, you can understand it. So there you go. Yeah, there are your elected people in Washington making their statements about the government shutdown. Here in the real world, though, life goes on. Hey, speaking of which, I wanted to get to this story real quick. It's about Honor Air. And they have still been making flights to Washington to take veterans up to see the war memorials. Well, one of the things the government was doing to trip them up, other than trying to barricade an outdoor memorial, was not opening the bathrooms located at the site. Now, some private citizens heard about the problem and donated the money to have some porta potty set up at the memorial. But yesterday, day before yesterday, really, the park police turned the truck away. Now, for the administration, this isn't any surprise, and it really isn't the point I want to make. What I wanted to point out is that private citizens stepped up to supply the porta potties. Heck, they're even trying to mow the lawns and pick up the trash over there. This demonstrates what I've been talking about all these many years. Private citizens and charities will always fill a legitimate need in this country. All of this screaming about how if government doesn't take care of the so-called poor, they'll starve and die. I'll let you in a little secret that everyone already knows. A lot of people on government aid aren't poor. Now, there's people with less money than others. You see that no matter what. There's people who have nicer things than others. But there aren't just that many poor people. Poor people meaning underweight, thin, malnourished people. If you're overweight, you really aren't poor. You have less money than other people. You're probably eating the wrong foods. I eat the wrong foods. You have bad health habits, but you aren't poor. Poor is Africa. Poor is people getting by on one meal every day or so. That's poor. And there's a huge difference in that, being poor and being lazy. We were taking care of people and feeding the hungry and clothing the needy before the government got involved. So why did it? Well, command and control. The government lusts after power. It wants to be in charge of everything it can. That's what governments do. They want to increase their power over more of your daily life, over more things in this country. And just look at history. You'd be hard-pressed to point to a period of time where government was trying to get smaller, where it was trying to reduce its impact in this country, where it was trying to back away and let you make your own decisions about how to run your life. From the very beginning, government has steadily increased its spending, its control, well, it's outright tyranny over the rest of the population of this country. It's a natural progression. This is why our founders said we'll probably have to overthrow our own government at some point. They knew what a lot of us are starting to realize today. Government isn't going to back off by itself. It isn't going to take, or it is going to take an active participation by the citizens of this country electing competent and limited government candidates. I mean, you see what's happening now. Park police actively oppressing citizens of this country, closing down roads and treating fellow citizens like they're criminals. I mentioned this on our Facebook page just this week, referencing the story on Yellowstone. And if you haven't heard it, this Massachusetts woman says she and her fellow tour group members were locked under armed guard inside the Yellowstone National Park Hotel during their visit. And what happened was the incident unfolded October 1st. I'm looking at the story here. When they were already inside the park, and a ranger would not let them off the tour bus to photograph roaming bison. The bus stopped along a road where a large herd of bison passed nearby. The senior citizens filed out to take photos, and almost immediately an armed ranger came by and ordered them to get back in, saying they couldn't, quote, recreate. So the seniors got back on the bus and went to the Old Faithful Inn, and pretty much they were held there. The Park Service locked the doors and said they couldn't go visit Old Faithful, the geyser, because everything was shut down. And one of the Park Service people, this wasn't in this instance, but over in North Carolina, I believe, he had said that he disagrees with what's happening. He said it's, quote, disgusting because they've been instructed to make life as difficult for people as we can. So he thinks it's disgusting. He doesn't agree with violating these people's rights, yet he does it anyway. So these park police are treating their fellow citizens this way. How many of them voted for Obama? And how many didn't? Yet they all followed orders to deny American citizens their rights, actively doing it. This park official knows what they're doing is wrong, yet they're still doing it, still violating the rights of their fellow citizens. Yeah, just go ahead and slide that rail car door shut on those Jews. This is what we've been addressing on this show all along. People ask, how throughout history can citizens participate in the oppression of their fellow citizens? I've said it before, but it bears repeating. This isn't about Republicans versus Democrats. It's about government versus the people. I'm sure some of those park rangers didn't vote for Obama, but they'll still enforce his policies that oppress others. If you take one thing away from this government shutdown, or slim down, or whatever you want to call it, if you take one thing away, it should be this: we don't need all this government in our lives. Not just federal, but state and local as well. We have way too much government in this country. Way too many people wanting to impose their will on others. I think you should live this way, so I'm going to use government to make you. I think you should act in a certain way, so I'm going to use government to make you. The reason they make these arguments for government is, as I mentioned, power and control. Okay, we're up on the half-hour break. Wow, already here on the Patrick Riggin Show. This is how fast this show goes by. Hey, when we come back, hey, we'll talk about those bitter clingers in government. Right after these messages from my lovely sponsors. Don't miss this next segment. Welcome back to the Patrick Riggin Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Coming back in here. Yeah, that's our president giving his press conference. All right. Oh, yes. You can't say the show isn't fun. All right. This segment, here's something I want you to think about. If your power is being threatened, as it is in Washington, their power is being threatened. Their money is being threatened. How far will the establishment, and by establishment I mean this so-called ruling class in government and the media, all these people who want to concentrate power in government, how far will they go to hold on to power, to keep all of that power and money in a centralized location under their control? Will you lie? Would you put out phony polls? Maybe not even outright phony, but less than honest polls to propagandize people? Would you try and punish and marginalize people who have the courage to stand up and speak out against this ruling class? Will you try to suppress all dissent against the government? Would you try to make the people fighting against government look like the bad guys? Well, of course you will. Yes to all of this. Just look at tyrannical, dictatorial governments all through history. You could just about lay their tactics squarely over what our government is doing to us right now. It would match up almost exactly. That's because all governments end up trying to oppress their populations. That's just the evolution of government. That's how it works. Our founders knew this to be all too true. That's why they talked about having to overthrow the government at some point if it failed to respond to the people. I don't think we're at that point just yet, but if the government starts to feel threatened, you can expect it to start spying even more and trying to make life hard for those people who oppose it. Just look at how the IRS has been used to harass the Tea Party organizations. You can probably expect more of that in the future as this country begins working its way towards more libertarian ideas. Heck, even Harry Reid accused the Tea Party of being on a jihad against government. All because we're asking government to stop spending so much money. We're trying to rein in all of this government run amok. But this is how far these government people will go. Nothing is out of bounds because they're fighting for their survival. They know if the idea of reducing the size of government catches on, then their money and power are at risk, and they'll do whatever it takes to protect that. And mentioning Harry Reid talking about jihad, you know, thinking about it, I think he let that term slip because it really hits the nail squarely on the head. To these government people, this is their religion. Government is their religion, and we're threatening it. We're attacking their religion. That's why these people are so hysterical about the very thought of moving power back to the citizens of this country. I mentioned last week how these government people are like a cult. Send all your money to the government. Let the government provide for you. Let the government tell you what to do. That's what a cult does. It seeks total and complete control of its followers. I can't think of a better way to describe government and these people's fanatical devotion to it. And not just in Congress, not just in the media, but all throughout this country. These people who worship at the altar of government, they demand you tithe and pay the king of everything, that being government. Pay him your tithes. Government provides everything you need. It protects you. It feeds and houses you. And just like a cult, it can be dangerous if threatened. If you confront it, it will react harshly. It will send its followers out to harass and, well, even kill you if necessary. People tell us we need to worry about the Muslims, that their religious fanaticism is dangerous. No, we need to worry about the government religion fanatics. These people who have this psychotic devotion to the religion of government, not only in Washington, but at all levels. This psychotic government knows best belief. Government is the answer. That's the real problem we have with trying to reduce the size of government. We're fighting a religion full of fanatics. They don't act using logic and reason. They act using their emotions. Their complete and utter devotion to the deity known as government. We don't need to worry about Muslim extremists. We need to worry about government extremists. These people who will fight tooth and nail to keep government in control, to keep their God in control, and they'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. If it's lying, if it's propagandizing, if it's making up poll numbers. You saw the same thing happen with this global warming debate and those religious fanatics. They're really an offshoot of the government fanatics, but they're just as dangerous. Tons and tons of their data, well, we found out it was made up. They were shown to be forging their numbers used to justify their religion. And yes, it's a religion too, global warming. Just look at how they still argue their global warming God exists. Their God has been discredited, yet they still cling to the faith that their religion is genuine and based in fact. If you want to know who the bitter clingers are, it's Obama. It's government. Obama stated that, quote, it's not surprising that they get bitter. They cling to guns or religion or antipathy to people who aren't like them. That's government people. I don't know how much of a better definition you could have. They are clinging to their guns by keeping armed police on guard to keep you from using government parks. Even prevent you from stopping along the highway to take pictures. Locking you in a hotel to keep you from watching the Old Faithful geyser. These government people are clinging to their guns and their government religion when they're threatened with the citizens demanding their rights and their freedom and their liberty. Just look at how far the government is willing to go to keep you in line, to keep you from exercising the freedom that has been taken from you. You used to have the freedom to visit national parks, but it's been taken from you. And when you try to get it back, you're met with armed park officers. It doesn't sound like the government's too interested in giving back what's been stolen, which is your rights. So if you can't trust government, if it's not going to look out, if it's going to look out for itself and not you, well then where can you look to for guidance on what it can do? It's the Constitution, the set of rules for our government. If you wonder if government should be able to do a certain thing, just look there. If it isn't listed, then no, the government shouldn't be doing it. Plain and simple. If you want to add it to the Constitution, we can. We can amend it to include whatever we want. You just have to get the votes to get it passed. The problem now is the government religion people don't want to do that. You see, the Constitution restricts them. It puts boundaries on their behavior, and they don't want that. To get around that, they tell you, the lowly citizen, what the Constitution means. You can't know what it means. You aren't taught in school for a reason. Same thing they used to do with the Bible. The religious leaders, they told you what it said. There was no reason for you to read it and determine for yourself what it meant. In fact, at times in the past, way back, it was illegal to have a copy in your possession. You simply couldn't understand. And it wasn't just the Bible. Other religions have had secret and sacred texts that, for some reason, the followers weren't allowed to read for themselves. It's the same thing with the government religion. The Supreme Court will interpret the Constitution. It will tell you what's acceptable and what isn't. The only problem is that's not mentioned in the Constitution. It doesn't say that the final say on its interpretation lies with the Supreme Court. It's not in there. That's a role the Supreme Court stole from the people of this country. In fact, I covered it on a past show. You can check our archives on it. YouTube.com/Patrick Riggins Show. That's YouTube.com/Patrick Riggins Show. My point to all this is, when you wonder why these people fight so hard against you, it's because government is their religion. They're true believers who see anyone who doesn't believe as they do as a heretic. They can't even understand why you wouldn't believe as they do. They can't comprehend why you don't see things as they do. And for the most part, it's because we don't believe in their God known as government. We don't practice their religion praising and glorifying that corrupt deity. That's why you see all this happening. You're watching a holy war being waged by the followers of government against us, the citizens of this country. We are up on the final break here of the hour already. Can you believe it? When we come back from the break, we'll listen to a little Stain there as we head out. We'll hit a couple more things when we come back. So be sure and join us. We're going to cram as much as we can into this last short segment here on The Patrick Riggins Show.
Let the man go through. Let the man go through.
That's right.
And let the man go through. Let the man go through.
Move aside.
And let the man go through. Let the man go through.
Welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show here on the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network and News Talk 98.7 WLKI. For this last segment, I wanted to read a few points from a column by Judge Andrew Napolitano. I posted a link to this on our Facebook page along with an excerpt, but I wanted to cover it here as well in case some of you guys didn't catch that or something. And I'll try to get to as much of it as I can before the end of the segment here. The column is entitled Before You Rejoice. And it starts out, before you rejoice that the government has seized an alleged terrorist in Libya who was indicted for planning the notorious 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Africa. Before you join the House of Representatives in a standing ovation for the Capitol Hill police who killed a woman whose car struck a White House fence and who then drove away at a high speed. And before you commend the New York Police Department for quickly getting to the bottom of an alleged assault by a motorcycle gang that tormented a young family on a city street. And what he's leading up to, before you rejoice at all that, please give some thought to the rule of law. Last weekend, a team of Navy SEALs kidnapped a Libyan, and I'm going to screw his name up. It's Abu Anas al-Libi. And they kidnapped him off a public street in Tripoli. The Navy men did not have a warrant for his arrest, did not have the permission of the local authorities or the Libyan government to carry out this kidnapping, and were unlawfully present bearing arms in public in Libya. Now, many of his alleged accomplices already had been arrested, prosecuted, and convicted in the U.S. The U.S. could have sought his extradition, as it did with some of them, had President Obama not bombed the American-friendly government of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi out of existence without a congressional declaration of war. The judge also writes, Obama apologists have praised this maneuver as a bloodless way to obtain justice without using drones to kill. Now, he notes on this, how low have we sunk when Obama can be praised for not executing someone with a drone? And he's right. Secretary of State John Kerry, acknowledging that al-Libi is innocent until proven guilty, has claimed that the rule of law was followed here because he will be brought to a civilian U.S. court for trial. You know, it's amazing how many of these liberal Obama supporters protesting against this very type of thing during Bush's presidency, and now you hear nothing from them. If this administration points out anything to you, I hope it's how superficial these liberals are. If their guy's in office, worldwide murder and killing of innocent people, it just doesn't seem to matter anymore. But getting back to the judge's column here, he continued with it. It borders on the ridiculous for Kerry to profess fidelity to the rule of law when this criminal gambit was anything but. Fact, we are not at war with Libya. Fact, we cannot lawfully, under international law, American law, or Libyan law, engage in law enforcement or offensive operations in Libya without the express consent of the local and national authorities. Fact, as a defendant in federal court in the Second Circuit, al-Libi must be brought to a federal judge in New York City within 48 hours of his arrest. He also writes, don't hold your breath waiting for him in Lower Manhattan, as the feds will, quote, debrief him aboard ship before turning him over to federal prosecutors for trial. One can only imagine what that debriefing will be like. It will no doubt consist of torture. That's why the interrogation is conducted on the high seas, where the government will claim it is free to disobey any federal law. And that's why the Geneva Conventions prohibit housing prisoners of war aboard ships. What kind of government seeks venues in which it can break the law? One that has forgotten that every time Bush made his extraterritorial argument to the Supreme Court, it was rejected. Wherever the American government goes and whatever it does, it remains subject to the confines of the Constitution. Not to worry, administration sources claim, the FBI won't learn of whatever beans al-Libi spills while the CIA is simulating his drowning. And he continues writing, wrong again, while no federal court will admit evidence obtained under torture, the Patriot Act, that monstrosity that permits federal agents to write their own search warrants, requires intelligence interrogators and law enforcement interrogators to share information, even the results of torture. So much for the presumption of innocence, the right to a lawyer, the right to remain silent, the right to be brought before a judge, and the rule of law. The judge goes on to write, the U.S. is a signatory to treaties that prohibit kidnapping, no matter the governmental need for the victim. Just ask Robert Selden Lady, a former CIA station chief in Milan, who was convicted in absentia a few years ago in Italy of kidnapping a Muslim imam there, and then was arrested on an international warrant in Panama this summer. And as well as George Bush was also himself and others were convicted in absentia of war crimes by a court in Malaysia. And the judge writes, can you imagine the outcry if either of these two people were kidnapped off American streets by foreign agents? How can it be lawful for the U.S. government to kidnap innocent foreigners, but not the foreign agents to kidnap guilty Americans? And that's something to think about this week. How much we're overstepping our bounds as a country and how much we're really becoming not the country that stands for freedom and liberty and rule of law. All right, we're up on the end of the break here. If you want more information about us, as I mentioned, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Patrick Reagan Show. And you don't have to be a member of Facebook to see that. Just type in that address, facebook.com/Patrick Reagan Show. And you can also see us at our YouTube channel at youtube.com, again, /Patrick Reagan Show, and that's all together. And Riggins is spelled Riggins, in case you need that. And if you want to email us, again, same thing, PatrickReaganShow@gmail.com. Hey, remember, as I say every week, liberty begins with you. It's in your mind. Don't forget that as you go throughout this week. Join me next Saturday afternoon at 4, where we'll be fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. Thanks for listening, and have a fantastic week.
Released from indenture, as a dreamer dreams and a traveling man.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on The Patrick Riggin Show.